where are lived values being promoted, being exploited, being upheld. You will allow that knowledge and that information to positively disrupt your own frame of reference for the world. Sometimes rationality doesn't work and you have no logical explanation. I did a blog post recently called The Receptive Mind, and in it I talk about knowledge encounters, or what I refer to as knowledge encounters. Now what I mean by that is, as we go through our day-to-day lives, as we encounter new information, how receptive are we to that? What state of mind are we in that means we can absorb that? And it came to my mind because there's a lot going on in the world at the moment. There's a lot of pressures that we're all experiencing in many different sort of facets of our lives, right? At the macro level, you got the whole geopolitics piece and where are lived values being promoted, being exploited, being upheld, and what are the consequences of actions that people, we haven't, as individuals, had, a majority of us at least, had much to do with selecting, and yet they are making decisions that even those who did select them didn't choose to take part in, and there's fallout from that in terms of day-to-day cost of living, affordability, etc. And there's all those pressures that are there, and that's consuming news headlines at the moment. And then everyone going through your lives is going to be facing your own pressures, whether they are work-related, linked or not linked to economic and global dynamics, whether they're family-related, whether they're just to do with your own state of mind, and you can't explain it. Sometimes rationality doesn't work, and you have no logical explanation for feeling rubbish, and yet you do. Anyway, all those pressures, all of those dynamics, all affect the way that we encounter and receive new information. I saw somebody yesterday talk beautifully about the window of tolerance, and the graph they used was a wave like this, right? And within that wave you had two dotted lines going across it. Now the gap between those dotted lines is your window of tolerance, and the wavy lines are the peaks and troughs of life, and how you respond to those peaks and troughs, whether they stay within your little window, your dotted lines, or whether they pop outside of it, affect how you respond. If they go above, then you tend to hyper react, and those are demonstrated with quite visceral emotional responses, anger, or over enjoyment, right? But excitement that's uncontrollable, right? And so you got this extreme response on one end of the spectrum, where you can end up doing things that you didn't mean to do, you didn't consciously think about, and you certainly didn't have intended consequences with, and yet actually there are negative impacts from that response you've had. If it drops down below that tolerance window, then you kind of crash and burn, right? You just can't get up. You fall asleep. You can't get out of bed. It's called a hypo reaction. Anyway, that tolerance window is not in the blog, but it speaks to the same point, which is if we are feeling either hyper or hypo responsive to certain environments, that will affect how we receive new information, because we're not short of being exposed to information, right? if we're within that tolerance window, if your nervous system is regulated, if you're in a calm state, then you tend to receive new information with an openness. You can engage with curiosity a lot more, and you can do what's called accommodating that information. You will allow that knowledge and that information to positively disrupt your own frame of reference for the world, right? And in doing so, you're expanding your frame of reference, you're increasing your knowledge of the world, and you're increasing your own ability to manage and navigate scenarios and situations. If you don't do that, if you're outside your window of tolerance, or if you are in a nervous system state that is overly activated, then you don't tend to accommodate that new information. You tend to assimilate it, which means you look at it and you interpret it within your own frame of reference. And so you're selective with what you take, and you don't allow for that positive disturbance of your own frame of reference. Now, in today's world, with everything that I spoke about at the beginning of this little video, in terms of the pressures and challenges that people are feeling and facing, if we're in a state where we're unable to accommodate new information in a constructive, positive way, then we're more likely to be assimilating, and that's then the definition of repetition of pattern behavior, right? It's the definition of insanity, where you continue to go through these different stages and you don't actually move forward. You don't actually learn new information from it. So check out the blog. It's quite interesting. I've had people who have read it say that it's timely and written beautifully well. So have a look. Make your own judgment on that. I'll put a link in whenever I post this, wherever I post this. And if you want to chat about it, let me know. It would be good to understand where you're at with it. Take care.